And it should say connecting to yes. Welcome YouTube for Clear Vision Wednesday. I'm Claudia Mühlenweg. I'm your host. I'm the creator of the Natural Clear Vision Method. And today I have a super special guest that I'm excited about. He, like me, we are both Bates Method vision practitioners. We're trained in the Bates Method. And our topic today is an interesting one because you might have heard of the Alexander technique. I've heard of it. Actually, my teacher, Margaret Montgomery, is an Alexander teacher. So I learned just a little bit, but I can't really say I know much. And that's why we have Kevin here. And our topic today is called Two Peas in a Pod. And I will bring Kevin on right now. Let me highlight you. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, great to see you. Great to be here.
Yeah, so we basically, I don't like to read bios because I always feel it's like boring. You might as well tell your story. Obviously, you're a Bates Method practitioner and you're an Alexander Technique practitioner or teacher. So tell us a little bit about how did you end up doing what you're doing? And yeah, just share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so these stories are always so interesting because, people come for a reason to this work. And I actually heard of the Alexander technique first. I didn't know anything about Bates Method. And that was when I was 15 years old and I was going to my piano teacher and she told me this amazing story about an injury that happened to her. It was a performance injury. And she was doing her debut recital in Wigmore Hall here in London. And she was busy playing a flurry of notes for, I don't know, it's about an hour and a half or so they do a performance. And she said that suddenly she felt like two guns went off inside her arms. She could still play. And, she was obviously a little bit kind of disconcerted. I mean, majorly disconcerted about what had happened. She had no idea what had happened. She finished the concert, and the next morning when she woke up, both arms were black and blue with bruises from fingertip to shoulder, and they were blown up to twice their normal size. So this was a career-ending experience. She tried everything she could possibly find. She went to doctors, she went to physiotherapy, she went to massage, she went to osteopathy, I don't know, all the different things. And she finally, as a last resort, went to an Alexander Technique teacher. Now, this was before it was as well known as it is now, and it's still not that well known. Her flatmate thought it was a bit of nonsense that she was going to do, going to see this person who obviously had never had the training that she had had. And within half an hour, now put this into context, this was 2 months after the injury. The bruising was less, but the swellings were still there. So her arms were still ballooned up to twice the normal size. And within half an hour, the swellings were almost completely gone. And as a 15-year-old, I was like, oh, wow, the world works in a strange way. I had no idea that was possible. And you just take it on board. You don't really kind of think about it. But I was very impressed, of course, and I knew about it. And I, some years later, I didn't have such a spectacular injury, but it had its own story to it. I was overtaken by a knee problem, and that lasted for about 2 or 3 years before I had an x-ray done, and they told me that I was getting arthritis and that I would be very likely in a wheelchair within about 6 years. So I was 24.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So this is 34 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what I did. I mean, I walked out of the doctor's office. I was so almost disillusioned that life could have handed such a thing to me, because it wasn't just that it was, I think they said 90% chance of being in a wheelchair within 6 years. And it was inevitable eventually. There was nothing they could do to stop it. And I thought, I'm sure this is not what my life is supposed to be like. And I always say to people, I came out of the doctor's office, and instead of going straight ahead, I turned left. So I started to look elsewhere. And my sister had Alexander lessons. She kindly bought me some, 3 lessons to try it out, and then I was completely sold on it. I thought, I've got to do this. This is just amazing. And it was during the Alexander lessons that I experienced my vision improving. And I'd heard of Bates by now. This was several years after I, first heard of the Alexander technique. So we're, 10 years later. I'd read Bates and I thought it was very interesting, but I'm too far gone. Minus 7.5 diopters. I can't possibly get anything happening and that sort of thing. And I was astonished one day in the lesson to be brought up from the table. I could see perfectly. I was suddenly able to look at the, we call it grouting in the UK. I don't know, it's around the edges of bricks. You have this sort of...
the grout.
Yeah, right. And I could see that on buildings about 80 yards away. I could trace around the edges of it. And it lasted for just maybe 5-10 seconds, and then suddenly it closed down again. I said, what on earth happened there to my teacher? And he explained to me that in the work in the Alexander technique, we look at the relationship between the head, neck, and back. And there's a natural balance there, which has largely been lost in modern civilization. It's like people are so urgent about their lives. They've got to do this, they've got to do that. Their minds are distracted. And it starts to sound like Bates' method when I say this, because very much when you say to a person, look where you're looking and be here now, and we're talking about the Alexander technique and the Bates method to me. So it works exactly the same way. So he explained that there was a delicate balance, and this is what we've been looking at the whole time. And just for one brief moment, I was free, and my vision said, that's fine, I can see now. So that's the story in a nutshell, how that happened. I went on, I trained in the Bates method first. Well, that experience led me to getting lessons in the Bates method, which eventually led me to training. And in the midst of my training, I took up Alexander training as well. So I completed both around about the same time, about 2 years apart overall. So there we go.
So tell us, I'm just so interested. So I know they were contemporaries, Bates and Alexander, and and maybe we need to look at the Alexander technique first, because if you're watching this live or the recording of this, you're probably interested in vision improvement. You probably know a little bit about the Bates method, but Kevin, you will also, I would love for you to kind of, this is Alexander, this is Bates, maybe kind of so that everybody, even if you've never heard of either of these, that you get an idea, what they stand for, what they do, and then we look at what are the similarities.
Okay, yeah. Well, the way I see it is that we're working on the same condition. The human being, think of that as the canvas. This is the thing that we're working upon. The Bates method obviously works with the eyes, and the vision is an enormous part of how we interact with the world, how we integrate with the world. I've heard figures of around about 80 to 90% of your nervous energy is used in visual processing when you're awake. This is a big doorway into the self. It's a big doorway into the being, into the person. The Alexander technique is, as I said, back. But that is, rather than being visions to do with light, this is to do with how we respond to gravity. So one of my colleagues way back once said, the Bates work is very much like receiving light without strain. And Alexander technique is receiving gravity without strain.
Wow, that is beautiful. We have to say that again. Say that again. That's
okay. Yeah. So the Bates method, receiving light without strain, and the Alexander technique is receiving gravity without strain. So we have a structural use of our body which is actually pretty much reflexive and instinctive in a natural setting. But in situations where we've got complexities of life, we start to feel like I'm not where I should be. I need to get this done, I need to get that done. And the body starts to feel that and put actual tensions in place which hold that reality. Yes, that we start to get pushed and pulled around. It becomes so familiar, it feels normal.
Right.
Yeah.
And same with the visual strain. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've seen that from clients when I talk about, do you notice how your vision varies? And some people, yeah, immediately, oh yeah, I feel the difference between strain and relaxation. And a lot of people, especially if you've been wearing glasses, and I don't know if that's you, and a lot of people, especially if you've been wearing glasses, and I don't know if that's your experience too, you don't even notice because it becomes the new normal to have that strain.
Yes, yes, and that experience that some people may know already, that when a strain is dropped, you only realize that you were holding it the moment you let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, kind of a shocking moment. You can say, what have I been doing to myself? And what else is hiding in there? It's like very, disconcerting and exciting at the same time.
So maybe share a little bit with us. How did Alexander discover his technique? How did Bates discover it? And then, so I love the simplicity of your sentences to describe like what they both stand for.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's interesting about Bates, because he was trained as a conventional doctor, a conventional eye specialist, and he was not just an eye specialist. He was what they call an ears, eyes, nose, and throat specialist. I mean, he was a doctor. He did understand all the different things, but he became super interested in the eyes. Somehow, with that conventional training, he was already thinking outside the box. Right from the age of 24, 25, he was putting forward new theories, new ideas, and getting papers published, and really highly respected journals were taking them, and he was getting a reputation for being quite a an innovator. I mean, that discovering the properties of the suprarenal extract of the suprarenal gland, which became commercialized as adrenaline. I mean,
Right.
major stuff that he was like, oh, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to work at that. I'm going to do this, fantastic kind of innovator. And Alexander was born in a completely different environment. He started his life in Tasmania, pretty much as far away from the rest of the world as you can possibly get. It was a rough environment, a very, it was what they called a penal colony. So a large proportion of the population had been convicts or descended from, say they'd been convicts themselves or descended from convicts, of course. And you had to fix things yourself. There wasn't, I'll go and get a roofer because my roof's leaking. You actually thought, oh, I need to learn how to do that. And, your dad would do it, and you would then learn how to do it. And all the different things about life were, sorted out by you. From that unlikely beginning, he wanted to be a Shakespearean actor.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's what he wanted to do. So he worked at first in Tasmania, but he went on and followed his passion and went into a career of going around, I suppose you'd call it vaudeville in America, variety shows we might call them, where things were done in different villages or towns around, and these things would be very far apart. It's a bit like the USA where towns can be very, very far.
Right.
So, he was traveling everywhere. He apparently took a show to New Zealand at one point. I've just learned today. I thought I'd do a bit of research. And so he was very active. And he then became beset with a problem. He had learned how to project his voice, to stand on stage and give a soliloquy from Shakespeare and just wow the audience. He started to lose his voice. And he struggled for a long time with this. He would go up, and by the end of the performance, his voice would be croaky. He wouldn't be able to project anymore. Something was wrong. He started to try and rest his voice before performances, sometimes not talking for up to 2 weeks. But sure enough, in the performance itself, he would lose his voice. He eventually, he tried many things. I don't know what all the things he did, but he eventually went back to his doctor and said, listen, I lose my voice when I'm reciting, but when I'm talking normally, I don't. I must be doing something different when I'm reciting. And his doctor agreed that was a logical conclusion. And Alexander said, so what is it that I'm doing? And the doctor said, I have no idea. And they both discussed this for a little while, and the doctor encouraged Alexander, but that in fact the only person who seemed to know anything about the problem was himself. And with that background from Tasmania, where you fixed your own roof, he went away to figure out what was going wrong and to fix it. And he set himself up with 3 mirrors where he could see himself from different angles. And he stood and he pretended that he was about to perform and recite. And he watched. And he must have been very gifted with very remarkable powers of observation, because he was seeing subtle changes in the way his body was being used in the moments of his intention changing. I'm going to recite now, and he could see something had changed. And he reasoned with himself that the change he saw that was happening most markedly when he was reciting or about to recite was his head went back and his neck tightened, and he lost a little bit of stature. And he thought, well, obviously that's putting pressure on my voice box. I can't do that. So he started to think, oh, well, I'll just do the opposite. And this is where it gets really quite strange. Because when he thought he was doing the opposite, the problem was actually worse. So he got to this point in all his investigations that he realized that his own senses were not reliable anymore. He thought he'd walk away from the mirror, he'd practice, he'd think, oh, I've got it. He'd come back, go into the mode of reciting, look in the mirror, and it didn't lie to him. He saw the same problem again and again. He struggled for a good 6 months, thinking, what am I going to do about this? I cannot rely on my own senses. I cannot feel for the right thing because my sense of right is already wrong. Mm-hmm. And he eventually managed to reason that if my senses are wrong, I can't believe that I was born with this. I must have trained it into me. So there must be a way for me to untrain it, to bring it back out again.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just saying this is amazing. I mean, to have such self-observation, but I continue the story, but also with mirrors, right? I mean, the second you look in the mirror, it already feels different. I mean, at least to me, to be able to do that. Now we have phones and video equipment and we can just record ourselves, but keep going.
Yes.
It's so fascinating.
Yes. And he developed, there was, he knew what was supposed to happen. He reasoned with himself. He perhaps had observed in other people different nature of the way they used themselves and how they had things. And he started to explore not just reciting, but other actions as well. He could see that the pattern was still there in other things he did, that this wasn't just a reciting problem. He actually also did it when he was talking normally, but it was not as marked. It was not so strong. And he thought, okay, so this is a universal kind of state that I've actually created. It's not something that's related to this. This is something that my body believes is necessary, that I know unconsciously, wrongly, that this is necessary. And he developed an extraordinary, how to put it, it eventually became called inhibition. It wasn't the term that we know from Freud and, suppressing things and all that sort of stuff. It was a conscious choice to stop, to actually pause before you go into an action. And in that window of time that he opened up, he could extend it for as long as it needed to be. He thought, I can be free to choose any other action at any time. And this was critical. It was absolutely, it just put a wedge into the habit, hamster wheel. It's like, I've got to go round and round this way because I've always done it. Suddenly he was thinking, I'm not choosing what to do. Almost like tricking yourself that you can, I'm reciting suddenly. And because he hadn't gone there by the kind of like, right, now I'm reciting, he'd gone there by, I could do something else. So he thought, I could lift an arm, I could sit, I could walk away, I could do something else, I could be, whatever comes to mind. And his voice came out like a bell. He became able to perform again. He kept working on the same principle all the time, stopping, being able to choose, being able to move. And everything you hear or think about the Alexander technique, about what you have seen and heard, it's not that, because that's what you learn in the lessons. It's so hard to explain, to say, okay, everybody, go and try this out. It's actually an experience. You can be talked through it. Once you go there, you won't forget. Again and again. He became very well known on the performing circuit. He thought of it as, this was for his acting. And people started to want to come to him for lessons. And they said, he's great. I mean, he's got so much presence on stage. He was effortless when he was on stage. And he wanted to teach them to sit and stand in front of a mirror. But they didn't have his powers of observation. So another 20 years or so, there was a hands-on method to actually start to teach this. And it's not so much transmit as the person learns it because of the quality of the touch. Yeah. So that's basically it. I mean, he started to train teachers, and the timing for this, he had developed it before the turn of last century, so 1890s into the early 1900s. He was training teachers in the 1920s. So it took him that long to integrate everything he had learned. When he first was advertising what he was doing, he didn't even call himself, he didn't name it the Alexander technique. He called himself the breathing man. Because that's another result of this, as the breath starts to flow really, really easily.
The breathing man, it's like the modern day Wim Hof, well, he's the Iceman, but it's like, that's interesting, the breathing man.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so somebody else decided to name it Alexander technique then, or was he?
Yeah.
Well, the Bates method, they all named, Feldenkrais, a lot of these techniques are named after the creator. So share with us a little bit. So Bates we know he was a professor, he was always a researcher, he was always curious, he never took anything he learned for granted or accepted it as fact. If he found there was something wrong about that, right? He was always interested in the stories with him, right? That he thought his method only works for nearsightedness, and he didn't believe it would work for farsightedness or his presbyopia. And tell us a little bit about that story, how Bates realized that, like Alexander, how it's really not just about the reciting, right? How it's about this unique, like everything you do. And Bates realized eventually too that what he discovered really applies to any vision condition.
Yes, I mean, it was around about the 1910s onwards that he was, in that position where he was helping people with myopia, and a very blunt friend said to him, "What are you doing helping people with vision when your own vision is so bad? Can't you do anything?"
How old was he then? Remind the viewers, how old was he then?
Sorry? He would have been
at the time.
Okay, so he was born 1860, so he would have been
in his early 50s, right?
52, yeah, 50
Uh-huh.
something like
Uh-huh.
that, yeah.
And he had the glasses, the reading glasses.
Yeah, he had glasses for every distance. So he had glasses for 12 inches and more for 10 inches and more for 14 inches. And he had a whole array of different spectacles to help him to read at certain distances. So he was as presbyopic as they come. And, you know, he was very puzzled. I mean, he wanted to have some colleagues help him with this, and he went to various ones, and they said, "Oh, there's nothing you can do about this. You know, your lens is as hard as stone. You know, why are you bothering? This is, you know, a fool's errand." And he eventually found, I think it was a pastor or a churchman,
Right.
yeah, who was willing to, you know, be trained up enough that he could use the retinoscope and help Dr. Bates to understand what his focus was actually doing in the moment it was changing, so he could get feedback. And indeed, I think when he looked far in the distance, he was focused for the near point, or, you know, a certain, you know, he looked at, I don't know how far away it was.
I remember because he was presbyopic. I think when he looked close, he was focused for the distance. That
That's right.
happened. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
then it was actually reversing at various points. It was
Right,
actually,
right.
there were points when it was focused at the near point, but he was looking somewhere else, or thinking that he was looking way off. And it's very similar to Alexander's faulty sensory appreciation. The things have actually got very jumbled up. How do we fix this? And it's you know, it's the case that it seems impossible, doesn't it? Because you go, how did I get into this mess?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, those concepts. I mean, Bates and Alexander did know about each other. They didn't know that much about what they were actually doing. Of course, what Alexander saw was people misunderstanding Bates, coming out and practicing, and I will quote from Alexander, beastly exercises.
Beastly.
Beastly, yeah.
Oh my God! What kind of exercise was he talking about?
Alexander was completely, exercises are not the way. Exercises is, you know, and Bates was very similar to that. He didn't really mention the word exercises at all.
Yeah.
So, and so many people think, well, you know, of course you're going to strengthen your eyes like doing push-ups at the gym. You know, you're going to, you know, muscularly do this and muscularly do that. And, you know, there are many techniques that reflect that. And we're always saying, oh, no, these techniques that we teach are to help you unwind, to release, to let go of all of those things that you think are necessary in order to see. It's, you know, it's exactly the same with Alexander. Yeah. You know, people come away from an Alexander lesson sometimes feeling like they're floating. They are standing upright. That thing of faulty sensory appreciation that sometimes happens in lessons, they can be standing there and they say, I'm falling over. And then you put them in front of a mirror and they see that they're standing beautifully, like they're really poised. And it's like the mind goes, this is totally, you know, doing in my senses, because it's not the way I relate to the world. It's completely changed. And they're not thinking about posture. That again is another, you know, lock-in word. What is my correct position? It's a dynamic state, and it's in dynamic flow at all times.
Right, we all learn this like proper posture, and I took a Feldenkrais workshop once, so I don't know. I don't know what the difference is between, because there's also osteopathy in Europe, which is very much about that alignment, but it's in that kind of relaxed way, not that rigid posture. And Feldenkrais lesson I took was the same thing. Right, it was more like in your natural stance, but I can't even explain anymore. I did it probably 10 years ago. But it was not what I thought about posture. Like, you know, you kind of like, okay, now stand straight, that kind of thing that we learned as a kid. So I'm curious. So you said you had this crazy improvement, or like at least temporary. You had like a -7.5, and suddenly you could see the grouting in the bricks 80 yards away, which is obviously, right, that is pretty perfect vision, I would say. And but does Alexander actually work directly with the eyes, or is it just that kind of, so to speak, like a byproduct of reducing that strain to gravity?
Everything in the Alexander technique is a byproduct.
Mm.
So it's, in fact, I'm not sure if I have the book to hand here, but there's a book about the Alexander technique called Indirect Procedures. Everything that you want to achieve, you've got to look after this first. So that's the relationship between head, neck, and back. The way, okay, here's a comparison between the two. So Bates referred to the problems of the vision. He talked about strain, and its response, or its answer, resolution, was relaxation. Alexander, being a Shakespearean actor and very wordy and very Victorian in his way, he had two terms. One was end gaining, so that's gaining with an N for November, G-A-I-N-I-N-G. People often hear it as gaming, as in like playing games.
Right.
But it's end gaining. So that's trying to gain your end. Like, I have a goal and I'm going to go at it without thinking, which is, habits are going to get me there. I mean, all my I know how to stand, I know how to move, I can, do this fast. End gaining without paying attention to the means whereby. This was equivalent to Bates's strain and relaxation. It's exactly the same thing. The way Alexander went into it was looking at what happened in the relationship between the head, neck, and back. So when a person started to end gain, they would always, without fail, tighten the muscles at the back of the neck.
Would it be like the forward head posture, or is that not related to that?
That's also part of it. It's like that requires muscles on both sides to be kind of holding in different ways. And
right.
People with vision, particularly myopic people, tend to do that quite a lot.
Right, right.
And I remember doing this with the moon, thinking if I go a bit closer, I can see it better. You have to sort of say that to myself. I say that to myself. I say that to students. I say, just imagine you're looking at the moon. If you take a step forward, is it going to help? Okay, there's no need for you to push forwards. It's going to make no difference. And we're going to let that come into this place that we're in here. And
okay, well, I just see a comment that, I don't know, Tracy said Feldenkrais was a student of Alexander, I think, and took the work in its own direction. I'm not sure about that, to be honest. But
that's actually right. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah. Okay. So
Alexander, yeah. I was going to mention it, but Alexander Feldenkrais went to Alexander, I think, about 4 years, and there was a bit of a falling out between them because Feldenkrais did develop and move things into a different kind of arena, but he gave no credit to what Alexander had taught him, and Alexander was really not happy about that.
Well, I mean, I who wouldn't be happy? But I just remember from that workshop was that the posture was so really about the mindfulness and the awareness and being in this space. It was not like, okay, here's a stick figure and you have to align the back of your head, the plumb line, which we also know, like it wasn't anything like that. So I thought that was really impressive to me. That was very different. So when you talk about Alexander, it reminded me of that. And interesting now that they were actually, or that Marshall Feldenkrais was a student of Alexander. And I know Feldenkrais developed the whole thing for the eyes as well. So maybe he looked at Bates and Alexander and he put the two together, the two peas in a pod, like we named this talk, which Bates didn't understand Alexander, I think, or he didn't even, what was Bates? Because you said Alexander kind of understood Bates, but Bates was not getting it, right?
Yeah, Bates was, okay, so Alexander was very negative about Bates because all he had perceived was the exercise mentality of most of the people who had misunderstood what Bates was doing.
Oh, I see. I thought he was understanding Bates and saying you shouldn't do the beastly exercise.
No, he was, if Alexander had actually sat down with Bates and actually done some back and forth, they would have been, oh my goodness, we are on the same page.
Right.
I gave Bates's original book to one of my Alexander teaching colleagues who was curious, and she read it all the way through, and she said to me, "This is pure inhibition." So it was, that's the Alexander sort of holy grail of like, this is what solved his problem, was the ability to stop before the habits took hold.
And you called that inhibition.
Inhibition. It's the conscious choice to stop. Conscious choice to stop. So I mean, I can demonstrate that on you, Claudia, if you like, just right now.
Sure, we could do that. I also want to make sure we have time for questions, but so far I haven't seen many questions yet. But yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so say for instance, I told you to stand up.
I'm standing already. Okay.
You're standing already. Okay, have you got a chair nearby? Are you going to disappear?
I do have a chair nearby. If I sit down, you won't see me anymore. But
That's right. That's right. Well, we will trust that you will reappear at some point.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if I said to you, you sit down. Okay.
Okay. Does not see my head.
That's right. I can still see you. Okay, and stand up. Right. So instead of responding to what I say is like, I have to do that now, I want you to open the window. That moment where you literally do not have any inclination to do what I say, or even what you might instruct yourself, because you might say, I'm going to sit down and do it yourself, but you can still open a window when it's your own instruction. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to say sit down and just simply do nothing.
Okay.
Just stand there. All right? It's going to be weird. All right? Okay, Claudia, I'd like you to sit down. Okay, just see how your body feels, because there are so many situations that we have been in from very early age where we had to do what we were told. Right? So the musculature starts to do stuff. Say, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Oh, this feels funny.
Yeah,
Oh,
I felt like moving. I felt like suddenly doing swaying or something.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Am I really allowed to not do what I've just been told? All right? Tell yourself to sit down and simply stop. That's good. Yes. Very nice. Very good. Did that feel different going to the chair that time?
It totally felt different.
Yeah.
Very different. Yeah, it was not free. I can't even describe it. It sounds so strange, but it was lighter. Yeah, less effort. Yeah. Sure.
So there are these micro tensions that go all the way through the whole system when we go, oh, I'm going to do that because I've just been told. I'm going to do that because then I'll be, doing the right thing. I'm because I've been trained, like circus performers. I've been trained to literally do what I've just heard as an instruction. It could be anything.
Now, can I ask you something? So, and I'm sure you have similar things. So I have some clients that are like, tell me exactly what to do. How many swings? How many sways? How long should I palm? How often? And I always say, explore. Try it out. Like, see what works. And some people are just like, no, I want this. And then I had a client. He's like, I did 100 swings every day, like you told me. And I'm like, well, how did your eyes feel? Oh, I wasn't paying attention to that. And that's exactly, like, to me, that was the epiphany of, somebody tell me what to do, but there was no, and of course you don't see improvements, right? I mean, you can, because like I always say, the eyes are not like abs. We talked about the gym earlier. You can't just do these mechanical exercises and expect anything changing, right? So, but yeah, I'm just curious because I like that Alexander approach a lot. And it totally makes sense because Bates and Alexander are two peas in a pod. How are you responding to something like that when a client is like, tell me exactly what to do? How often should I do this?
I do the same thing. I encourage them to think, well, it's not actually the technique as exercise that's important. What's important is your engagement. Mm-hmm. Now, if you do it, really present in the present moment and you're really engaged and you do it like that consistently for 10 swings, that's a lot better than doing 100 and you're thinking about counting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. I love that.
They start to go, oh, okay. And I mean, the thing that happened with me in the Alexander, so I went to my first lesson, I felt very different afterwards. I said, what's happened to me? This is so strange. I don't know how that's happened because the teacher didn't do anything. They put hands on me, they spoke to me, told me to think about letting my neck soften. And we do a lot of work at first lying down often. We lie down and head on some books, and the teacher works on you as you're doing that. And I came up and I was freer, and I walked and I felt very different. And then the next week I came back and I was trying to hold on to that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And my teacher put his hands at each side of my head and then said to me, what we are doing here is learning how to not do. And it was like throwing me into the void. I mean, I had never come across any kind of concept like that. And I puzzled for months and months about it. But what he was actually telling me is that you are doing so much at the moment that we cannot get anywhere until this stops. So just in a brief moment when you're moving into the chair and I was saying, just stop, just wait. The interactive process, the way that your body receives the information that I'm going to do this now, I'm going to do this now, and it is working off habit, and it is so used to it and really good at it. Those habits are not necessarily all what you really want. There's actually a way of moving that's much lighter and freer. So with that stop comes the window of time. Suddenly you've said no to yourself, to who has instructed you, and your body starts to feel like, I am me in this world. I'm paraphrasing. Alexander didn't say any of these things, but this is what I've experienced with teachers and with myself and with students. They start to be themselves more and more and more.
You know what, as you were talking, that, we've often heard this, the kind of more Eastern concept, like, what about, instead of doing, focus on being, right? That idea of being versus doing. And coming from a German, very productive family where it's all about doing. And there's no being in my growing up. Like, I mean, as kids, we were pretty good at being, looking at the clouds and just being in that moment. We were really good at that. But, all kids are good at that. And then it gets trained out of you and you have to be productive. But I always, I got the idea of not doing, but then I'm like, what does being mean? Does it mean doing nothing, just laying in the grass and looking at the cloud? Like, so I think what I like, what you were sharing is more, Alexander gives you this practical, physical approach to this idea versus this lofty concept of like being versus doing, which sounds great, but then you're like, okay, how do I do that? How do I not do that? It's
It's a subtle kind of journey. Now, there's actually a period of Alexander's development of this work where he explored exactly that, where he thought, well, because my goal, my end, what I'm trying to gain, because that is distorting me, what would it be like if I simply did not go for that goal? And he said this worked very well. He didn't, pull his head back. He didn't shrink in size. But the problem was that nothing happened. So it's doing nothing was not the answer either.
Right.
That was actually another form of doing. Because
interesting. Oh my God, this is really interesting. And also, I mean, we're kind of almost out of time, but we have that concept. Because when I work with students, I used to avoid goals, like never I want to set any goals, whatever, because what if I fail? But now I find it helpful to get really clear on, I call it the vision for the vision, or what is your goal? Like just to have some kind of idea that you feel like you made progress, right? So what I always say that the goals are just something like a GPS you put in the thing, but maybe on the way there, you just notice, oh, this is so much better. So it's just kind of a rough idea of where you want to go. But how do you, like with Alexander, obviously his goal was to regain his voice and be able to recite on stage. But that was the initial reason to figure out how to still do his work and that he loved and not fail and lose his voice. How do you think of goals? And then we will look if there's any questions. I don't see any questions right now. So that would probably be the last thing I'm curious about, because how do you work with students? Maybe you don't set goals or you don't discuss what
yeah,
it wants. Yeah.
yeah. It's so beautiful. The goal that we think must come with some sort of doing is actually something that ends up doing itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, you wake up in the morning, you've got 2 arms in the right place, you've got 2 legs in the right place, your heart is beating, and not once did you think, I must make sure of all of these things. So there's a lot about you being alive which is completely trustworthy. It doesn't involve any thought of, how do I do this? Now, when we start to interact with our environment, that's where we can create problems for ourselves. When we think, oh, how do I get that faster? How do I do this in the way that all my colleagues are doing, all my friends are doing? Because we not only do it ourselves, we copy what others are doing around us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a cultural, social kind of agreement that this is how life feels and this is how it should be done. And it all kind of coalesces into this, I cannot get out of here. Now, Alexander had some great quotes. One of them, which I almost put on my business card, was, let's hope something goes wrong. And I thought, actually, people are not going to understand that.
No.
Because there's a freedom behind it. All the time, I've got to do it right, 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 I've got to do it right. And again, that's the same kind of pattern of holding that does to the body, mind. It gets locked up, the vision gets locked up, everything gets locked up. So let's hope something goes wrong. I thought, well, okay, I can't do that one. And I found another one of his, which was, the right thing does itself.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. So I have demonstrations of that. We do a thing with juggling balls, and I get people. Sometimes I do that with baits as well. I don't know if you did this with Margaret or Aileen.
Well, I got juggling boards and I practiced for a little bit, but then I never learned how to juggle.
Okay, so this is the Alexander way. I think it's an
Yeah.
Alexander way. So what you do is you've got your 2 hands, you've got 1 ball, and your goal is to throw the ball so that it lands in the other hand, but you're not to move that hand and try and catch it. Okay? So you throw and it falls, you do not react.
I think we've done that. I mean, it dimly reminds me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You just let it drop.
You just let it drop.
I hope something goes wrong.
Yeah, and if you have trouble with it, if your hand keeps trying to move, then you throw it in a ridiculous direction. Throw it somewhere that you know you're not going to catch it. The freedom is great. You suddenly go, this arm, this other arm, I'm kind of holding them out of sight of the camera, but this one's down here. It's literally feeling so free when I throw the ball over there. I think, well, why can't I have that freedom all the time?
That is brilliant. I love that. That's a great way to conclude. And I want you to share a little bit about, because I don't see questions. I want you to share a little bit, great comments though, but no questions.
Okay.
How can, because I'm now, so I want to explore this. So I was like, Kevin, isn't there something we can do? And you're offering everybody here a little workshop, like an introductory workshop.
Yes.
Alexander, tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so in the workshop, it'll take about an hour, and maybe a little bit longer, but time for questions as well. And we'll do the simplest, what I call a reset technique. It's just, it's easy for people to understand what that would be. In Alexander speak, we call it lying down in the semi-supine. It's lying on your back with your knees up, but I'm going to talk you through all of the patterns of release and directions of your whole self, mind, body combined. So through that, you'll get a recording that you can practice with afterwards. And it's part of a program that I'm working with a dear friend of mine. And we've been putting it together, and we're super, super excited to be introducing it to some real people out in the real world. So
I think this is fabulous. And I know you have for anybody here in my tribe, you have so I think 37, but you have a coupon code to get it to $27, right? US dollars, not in pounds, which is good.
Yes, that's right. $27 instead of 37. Yeah.
So I see the registration page. That's basically you put in your information, and then you write in the message, you would write something about that you came from the Clear Vision Club or the Clear Vision Wednesday, and then you get, so it's not a direct checkout page basically, but you put the information and then you connect with people. Awesome. And when is this happening?
Sorry?
When is this happening?
Oh, I know. I've got a date and I've forgotten what it is. It's in September, I think.
I put it in my calendar, but I was, I didn't write it down, so I put it in my calendar. I think it's in it's the 20, is it the 20? No, I can't find it either. But it's at noon Pacific. Oh yeah, I have it. No, never mind. That's not it. But it's at noon Pacific, so it's 8 p.m. UK, 9 p.m. Central European time. 3 p.m.
Yes,
like the same time as this show, exactly same time. But yeah, it's I forgot it too. I know I put it in my calendar, but now I can't find it. Anyway, is it on the registration page? Did you put it on there?
It is on the registration page. I'll make sure of that. I'm just going back. We've done so many messages in the last 3 days that
I know.
I can't see it.
Well, reach out to Kevin because it's not actually I wrote it down here. I did find it. I'm organized more than I think. It's September 15th, so that's a Thursday. Yes.
Yeah. Thursday the 15th.
September 15th, and so 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, $27. When you fill out the contact form, you tell them you come from Clear Vision Wednesday, and then you get a recording, which I love, so that you can continue to explore this right on your own or do it again and again.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm going to do this. I want to learn more about this. So are there any last YouTube, before we turn the live stream off, are there any last minute questions on YouTube that you want to ask Kevin? These require the discount code. Oh yeah, the discount code. We didn't say the discount code actually. So I think should they just put into the little form Clear Vision Wednesday, and then
that will be fine. Yeah.
Because it's not a checkout page, it's a little contact form, and so you submit your information. You don't pay anything, and you just say it in the little message box. This found you on Clear Vision Wednesday with Claudia, and then Kevin will reply to you, and then you get the $27 tuition basically. Yeah,
that's great.
Somebody's asking. This is obviously a great question. If you can't attend on the day, will you get a link? Will you get a recording link? Like, can somebody pay and then get a recording link?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. That's an option too if you can't attend live. And Kevin was brave. Somebody said Kevin was brave. I'm not sure what the reference is.
Hopefully they'll explain that.
Somebody said my brain is having a hard time processing this concept. Karen said that, so I'm not sure. But we had a lot of concepts. I think not doing is already doing or something. You had several things where I remember in the school we had a philosophy class, and it was on logic or something. And it was like, if the sky is blue and the grass is green, like something like that. And I was like, that was the only time I failed a class in my whole history of school. But yeah, I think the concepts are beautiful. And to me, I mean, maybe you say this, but to me, the way I understand it is, without effort, everything falls into place.
That's right. Well, I mean, the results do speak for themselves with this work. I mean, you don't have to be injured in order to sense that it's changing how you're going about your day, how you're feeling about your day. You end up with more energy by the end of the day. You end up feeling lighter. I mean, for myself, I was facing the possibility of being in a wheelchair, the very great likelihood of being in a wheelchair. I am not in a wheelchair. I am literally standing up, and I am fine. I would run around, but you wouldn't be able to see me because I go off the street. I can, I'm getting close to 60 years old, and I can still sit on my heels. And I could not do that for 4 years in my 20s.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just incredible.
Couldn't ride a bike. It was just, I hated my knee. I hated it with a passion. But boy, did it send me in the right direction. Mm-hmm. It was like a big sign saying wrong way.
It's interesting because for me, it was my glasses and my vision. And I was always this handicapped, and I was bullied and teased and got them at age 3. And and now I'm so grateful that I have these problems, because now I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't have those problems and I figured out how to overcome them. And with me as a kid, everybody was laughing at me. You can't get rid of your glasses. There's no way you can do that. And back in the 70s when I tried that, I had to look for a book in the bookstore, and thank God I found one single book. It wasn't the original book by Bates, but I found a book. And, now we have all the resources in the world, but also the resources in the internet can also be confusing. This is what I found, and probably, you too, that there's a lot of conflicting information. And a lot of people, when you put Bates method in, it says, this doesn't work, this is quackery, eye exercises. And again, it's like people totally misunderstand. It's not eye exercises. I can say that over and over again. And still people say, oh, the Bates method is eye exercises and it doesn't work. No, because eye exercises don't work. They might make you feel a little better, right? I mean, you get more movement, whatever, but eye exercises don't work. I always say, I have a whole YouTube on this, on the eye exercises don't work. Anyway, yes. Thank you so much, Kevin. So in the Clear Vision Club, if you're interested, if you're watching on YouTube and you're interested, put in the comments that you're interested. We have a Clear Vision Club. It's my monthly membership, and we have not just these calls, we have additional calls, but everybody here is on Zoom with us. And so we have a little extra powwow Q&A time that you don't get on YouTube. So if you're interested, let us know, or let me know in the comments, or send an email to support@myholisticvision, support@myholisticvision, and or just put a comment in the